Now, it may be a shock to the whole vast world, but I cannot avoid telling the story. I've experienced it. I can only share with you what I know. I'm telling you that if you dare to assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled, knowing who's doing it, it's God doing it. For God is your own wonderful human imagination, and He is doing it. If you dare to assume it and you walk in the assumption that it is so, ignoring the senses, ignoring the facts of life that deny it, in a way you do not know, it will become a reality in your world. This is what I mean by imagination plus faith. That these are the realities out of which we fashion our world. Take a man who is drafted. I was drafted in 1942 at the age of 38. Not quite 38, but going on 38. Like millions of us, I dare say they all felt as I did, but they didn't know this principle. I knew I didn't want any part of it. Nevertheless, I was drafted. I didn't resist it. They sent me off to Camp Hope, Louisiana. And after 3 months boot training, I decided I would do something about it by applying this principle. I asked, first of all, for an honorable discharge, because there was a regulation that came down from Washington that if a man was over 38 before March the 1st of 1943, he was eligible. It didn't say it was automatic. If his commanding officer felt that he needed him in his company, that decision was final with the commanding officer. You could not appeal it to any higher position. You couldn't take it to the general. So whatever your commanding officer was, and he was a colonel, if he decided he needed you in his battalion, you remained. Well, I applied based upon the fact that I was eligible, or I was 38 before March the 1st of 1943. And it came back to me disapproved and signed by my commanding officer. All right? That seemed final. But there is nothing final in this world if you know who God is. If you know that your own wonderful human imagination is God, you do not accept anything of the outside that is in conflict with your wonderful desire. So I desired to be honorably discharged out of the army and doing the work I'm doing now, for I did it before. I want to return to that work. So that night, here was a paper that I had received that day, disapproved and signed Colonel Theodore Bilbo Jr. His father was Senator Bilbo of Mississippi. As I retired in my barracks with all these men around me, I assumed I was in my own apartment in New York City. I knew it well. I left a wife and a little girl only a few months old when I was drafted. My son volunteered, and he was with the Marines in Guadalcanal. And they picked me up, and I was drafted, and my little girl was born the end of June of that year, so she was only a few months. And I had a wife and a little girl, and so I imagine I am home. My wife is in that bed, I'm in this bed, and my little girl is over there in the crib. And then I simply assume I am walking through the apartment. It was a nice 7-room apartment. And I walked from room to room and touched the objects, and they all seemed so familiar. And I looked through the window and I saw Washington Square. And I looked to my right and I saw 6th Avenue. And then, having gone all through the place, I simply returned to my bed and settled in it, all in my imagination. But I gave it the tones of reality. I gave it sensory vividness. I made it so real that it seemed to me I'm actually in my apartment in New York City. but I made quite sure I was not there on furlough. I was there because I was honorably discharged. No furlough, not going back. Well, 4 o'clock in the morning, before my eyes came a sheet of paper. It looked like the sheet that I got from the colonel, where it was disapproved. And as I looked at it, a hand came out from here to the hand and held a pen. And it scratched out the word disapproved. And it wrote boldly in script, approved. And then the voice said to me, that which I have done, I have done. Do nothing. I woke, and all the boys had hung to sleep. I remained because I couldn't break their sleep. I remained until that very moment when I could go down and shave and clean before anyone else did, which I did. And this thing is permeating my entire brain, what happened to me that night. For 9 days, I did nothing. On the 9th day, the same colonel called me in. And after a long chat with me, he said, go back to your commanding officer, captain, and tell him to sign another application. And so I went back. I had done nothing in the interval. And he signed another application. I went back to the colonel, and the colonel approved it. And that very day, I was on a train from Camp Polk, Louisiana, to New York City, honorably discharged. To this day, none of them knew or know what I did. I did it all in my imagination. I believed that what I did was fact. I believed that my imaginal act creates facts, and therefore I actually lived in my apartment, and I was not any longer a soldier. I was a civilian, but I was honorably discharged from the army, not dishonorably. And in 9 days, it was fulfilled. I can multiply that story by hundreds if one will actually do it, for we are the operant power.